Welcome in, everyone, and thank you for listening to the 123rd ever episode of the Missouri Sports Podcast, brought to you by 106 Apparel and recording from the Revel Advertising Studio in beautiful Springfield, Missouri. I'm one of your hosts, Cameron Albert, alongside my good friend and fellow Mizzou fan, Kyle DeVries. How are you doing today, Kyle?
I'm great. How are you, Cameron?
I'm doing well. Yes?
What, I can't adjust my mic?
Oh, yeah, go ahead. You just really looked like you were ready to say something.
I actually was going to.
Yeah, that's right.
What happens when we get to over 1,000 episodes? Are you going to be thank you for listening to the 1,725th ever episode?
That sounds like exactly what will happen.
Man, can't wait.
Yeah.
Till then.
We'll have to see, we'll see what happens.
That's a ways away,
cross that
but we'll get there.
Anyway, have at it.
Okay. Kyle, we got a lot to talk about. What's new? I was kind of excited to just talk basketball, for the first time in a long time, because football season's over. What could we possibly have to talk about?
Football season's never over.
Apparently so.
What's the saying? Football never stops.
Football never sleeps.
It never sleeps.
Yeah. Coach Drinkwitz never sleeps, because the first thing we're going to talk about is he's been hard at work recruiting, and he landed a big one. Not a traditional recruit. This is a transfer from Ohio State, and it's Mookie Cooper. You've heard about it. You've seen it. You probably watched refreshed your memory on his game film a little bit. But we're going to talk about him because he is the 10th highest recruit all time in Mizzou history, according to the 24/7 Sports composite rating. Now, that's as he was recruited out of high school to Ohio State. But still, number 10 all time. This is a huge get for the football team, and changes the outlook for the offense for the next few years.
Yeah, whenever we heard that Mookie Cooper was transferring from Ohio State, it definitely seemed like Missouri was kind of a match made in heaven, with him getting to come back home and be close to family. And I think we've seen what a Mizzou offense could look like in the future, what offensive threat would not want to play in a Coach Drinkwitz offense. I kind of see him in maybe a little bit of the Jalen Knox role, where he's just kind of used in a lot of different ways, maybe on some jet sweeps and, short pass, long pass. I feel like Jalen Knox is kind of a, all-purpose offensive player in a way. So I definitely see Cooper kind of being in that same mold. But he's clearly probably one of the more talented players to be on Mizzou's squad in a while. So I wish it was cool to commit to Mizzou out of high school, but we'll still take him. It seems like we always get those big talents after they've spent a couple of years elsewhere and decided they want to come back home, but we'll still take him.
Yeah.
And he still has 4 years of eligibility, so it pretty much is like getting him out of high school.
Yeah. I didn't play at all at Ohio State. Was kind of buried on the depth chart, which that's normal. Freshmen don't usually play that much.
Especially at Ohio State, I would assume.
Exactly, yeah. They've had pretty good teams as of late. Taking you back to his high school recruitment. So he was a 4-star, number 4 in the state of Missouri for the 2020 class. This class was not your normal state of Missouri class. This one included Dante Manning, Jordan Johnson, and Antonio Doyle, who were all ranked ahead of Mookie Cooper. All of them would have been top 5 all-time Mizzou recruits. So being number 4 in the state doesn't usually come with as high of a rating as it does in the 2020 class. That class was just kind of special, and it was a huge swing and a miss for Barry Odom at the time, just coming up empty on all those top guys. So another example of Coach Drinkwitz doing something that Barry Odom couldn't do.
Yeah, and we've talked a lot about the domino effect of recruiting and kind of opening the floodgates, if you will, to certain areas of Missouri or the country. And obviously St. Louis has been, and really Kansas City too, those have been barriers to Mizzou over the last 10 years or maybe longer, some would argue. It just has not been a real friendly connection, and we kind of felt like Barry Odom made some progress there, but still just wasn't getting it done. But Coach Drinkwitz has completely opened those floodgates, and all kinds of talent has been flocking to Mizzou recently. And I think this will, continue to be that way for a while, with when recruits see guys they look up to, and a few years older than them or something like that, like Mookie Cooper going to Mizzou, that's just a huge deal for future classes.
Yeah. I've read that he is incredibly well liked and respected in St. Louis football community, so that helps a lot. I wouldn't do this for any recruit, but I had to. I mean, I would say that probably 2 recruits a decade that Missouri lands have a written out recruiting analysis on 24/7 Sports. So I want to read this one to you, Kyle. This is from Alan Trieu of 24/7 Sports. He says of Mookie Cooper, stocky, solidly built, not a tall prospect, but has the muscle base to enter college ready to compete. Explosive player with excellent burst and good long speed. Elusive as well and can make defenders miss without slowing down. Excellent pass catcher, good route runner, and explosiveness allows him to create separation as he has worked hard on that part of his game. Catches the ball in traffic, strong and physical as a blocker, has no real glaring weaknesses, just needs to keep refining his routes. Height could limit his upside, but he is going to be a dynamic weapon who can be used in a variety of ways on offense, has the necessary profile to be an instant impact guy in college, and an early to mid-round draft choice.
Wow. You don't hear that about Mizzou wide receivers very often, recruits. But I think that Mookie Cooper has a better chance to be an immediate difference maker than Dominic Lovett probably, but I could see either one of these guys being maybe punt returners, just dynamic playmakers that we have to get on the field. But yeah. It's exciting.
And the last thing I want to say about that write-up was there was a player comparison, and the player that they named as a comp for Mookie Cooper is Curtis Samuel. Interestingly, this was written before Cooper committed to Ohio State. Curtis Samuel went to Ohio State. Now he's with the Carolina Panthers.
And he's good.
He was a running back in college, is a wide receiver in the NFL, but lines up in the backfield sometimes, gets those end-around sweeps and stuff like that, so makes a lot of sense.
I saw another player comparison from kind of a Midwest analyst recruiting guy. I think his name is Mike Farrell or Mike Farrell. He compared Mookie Cooper to Rondale Moore, which would be really exciting. So Rondale Moore being a guy who was instantly impactful at Purdue as a freshman, he was incredible.
Yeah, that was the type of guy where you just try to get him the ball every single play, as much as possible. Obviously this is super exciting. You mentioned Dominic Lovett, who will be here next year. We talked, I think, last week about Kiki Chisholm's decision to come back for another season. So I wrote down just a quick list of the receivers that are going to be ready and available to play next season. We've got Kiki Chisholm, Towski Dove, Jalen Knox, Barrett Bannister, Mookie Cooper, Dominic Lovett, Chance Looper, and J.J. Hester. As the short list off the top of my head that's a really solid group.
That's an exciting group. It's balanced. You've got kind of your longer possession type receivers like Kiki Chisholm and Towski Dove, and then you have quicker, maybe like bigger playmaker type guys with Mookie Cooper and Dominic Lovett and Jalen Knox. It's crazy just the balance, and everybody kind of brings something different, and I think that's a great thing. And
balance of classes too. You're not looking at a senior loaded class that's just going to drop off in the next few years. Now, if we're lucky, we're looking at a situation where we've got 1 or 2 guys maybe leaving early. Fingers crossed we can get to that point. I'll take anybody having a good enough season to where they can go pro early. As much as it hurts in the moment when they leave, it usually means they did something really good. So I think just like 2 or 3 weeks ago, we talked about the wide receiver group kind of being a question mark for next season. And the questions have been answered for the most part, at least as much as they could possibly be, and then some in the off season. Now, got to see the results on the field, but you can't ask for a better situation at this point.
I agree. And I mentioned this on Twitter, and I'm not sure what they'll look at as far as adding transfers. And whatever happens has to happen pretty quickly to be able to be eligible for this upcoming season with transfers and all that stuff. So we will probably know, honestly, like within the next month, what next year's team is going to look like. I mean, I don't know that we'll add very many people after February is over, but a familiar name you may remember is Jafar Armstrong. He's a guy that was from Kansas City and originally committed to Mizzou out of high school 3 or 4 recruiting cycles ago, and then flipped to Notre Dame like a couple days before signing day. He is in the transfer portal, and he has 1 or 2 years of eligibility remaining, so wouldn't shock me if he wanted to come back home and potentially play for Mizzou as well. And he would probably be a wide receiver, running back, just some kind of offensive threat as well. So that's just a name to keep in mind.
I'll take him.
I would.
Yeah. So the next piece of news that I have here is bad news, good news. Who knows? It'll be. We'll know shortly whether.
Big news.
Yeah, it's definitely big. We'll know in a little bit later whether this is going to be a problem or not. I think Ryan Walters has left his position as Missouri's defensive coordinator to take the same position at Illinois under Brett Bielema, new Illinois head coach. And since I'm reading things this episode, I might as well read Ryan Walters' statement on leaving Missouri to take over at Illinois. He said, "I'm thankful and grateful for the opportunity that Coach Bielema has given me to coach with him at the University of Illinois. Coach B is one of the most respected defensive minds in college football, and as a young defensive coordinator, this is an opportunity I can't pass up. Coach B has a proven track record of incredible success in the Big Ten, as well as his years working in the NFL, that will put our program in position to win at a high level. I appreciate the time and opportunity that I had at Missouri, but my family and I are looking forward to the new challenge in front of us as we build a championship football program."
Yikes. I have some thoughts on this. We've known that Ryan Walters, it's a pretty good chance he would not be at Missouri next year, and there's a lot of different ways you could look at it. That you could look at it from his perspective. You could look at it from Coach Drinkwit's perspective. You could even look at it as maybe he's a rising star in the industry and could even take a better job, which I thought could happen. Mizzou's defense was not great this year. I think they were a little bit disappointing overall, but I definitely still thought, as a young up-and-comer, a talented guy, I thought he could maybe go up the ranks. I think that you could probably consider this a lateral move or maybe even a step down. And so that was a question I saw a lot on Twitter, was like, why would he take this job? And well, there's a lot of reasons. And I guess right off the bat is Ryan Walters was not a Coach Drinkwitz hire. And so obviously I think it's great that Coach Drinkwitz retained Ryan Walters, and it created some consistency kind of between the coaching staffs and with the players and recruits. And they were able to kind of maintain that same scheme on defense. And we had a lot of good players that, we wanted them to just play their last year in the scheme that they were familiar with. And so I thought that was a great decision to retain him. But at the same time, long term, it's not his guy. And it's perfectly reasonable for Ryan Walters to think, I've got one more year here. Let's do what we can. And then I probably need to start over, find a new situation, and kind of start over. And, there was a lot of, like I said, there's a lot of good players. The defense is a little disappointing. I'm not sure his seat was hot, but I don't think that Mizzou or Coach Drinkwitz is one, they're not unprepared, and two, I don't think they're terribly disappointed with Ryan Walters wanting to move on. Yeah,
I don't think they were desperate to keep him. And I think what you're saying, I think, is exactly right about it just kind of helping to set Coach Drinkwitz up for more success than maybe would otherwise be there in your first season as head coach, bringing over that continuity on defense, not having to start from scratch there with the players that you have. I mean, I don't know. Maybe I could see a line of thinking that's like, this will buy you a win or two in your first season, just, where you don't want to just completely flop, even though expectations are low. So with as successful as the season ended up being, I think maybe there was a more comfort from Drinkwitz's side to be able to say, like, okay, I've shown I can win here. So now let me kind of do my thing and build a staff that's really exactly how I want it.
Yeah. I think it took a lot of common sense for him to just look at the situation last year and say, this makes a lot of sense to retain some of the defensive staff, and then maybe we'll look to kind of build how I want to do it in the future in a year or two. And it's really uncommon for I feel like head coaches to retain an entire defensive staff or offensive staff whenever they come in. And I don't know if that's kind of an ego thing or just kind of wanting to totally purge the former regime or whatever. But I felt like that was I don't know, kind of honorable almost from Coach Drinkwitz, and just took a lot of common sense to just say, hey, I think this will help us out in the short term and maybe the long term.
Yeah. And yeah, obviously it doesn't seem like Ryan Walters was going to be fired. But at the same time, it seems from the outside looking in that everybody involved was pretty much okay with him looking at other opportunities.
Yeah. He's been at Mizzou for a while now. I think he's been in kind of a coordinator position for 2 or 3 seasons now, and he was here at Mizzou before that too, as like the safeties coach. So it's really almost uncommon that kind of an up-and-comer in the industry stays in any role very long, unless they're like a head coach or something like that. That's just this business. There's a lot of short-term stuff, and people move around a lot. And as they should, people find better opportunities. And
you don't see that like Gary Pinkel, Dave Steckel, head coach coordinator combination very often. I mean, you look at like one of the biggest outliers in college football today is Clemson.
Oh yeah.
With both of their coordinators, just like, well, they've got defensive coordinator Venables, and then 2 offensive coordinators that just seem totally fine with just sticking around. Obviously, Clemson pays them quite well.
And they win a lot.
And they win.
Venables' son literally plays on the team.
Yeah. So that's definitely just a unique situation where how are those guys not head coaches? Like all 3 of them probably could be head coaches if they wanted to be.
Right.
But yeah, you just don't see coordinators and position coaches stick around quite like you used to see. And maybe we're just not in tune with that because we did get Gary Pinkel and Dave Steckel for so long. I mean, there were some different offensive coordinators here and there during the Pinkel years.
Yeah.
So that means this coaching staff has a spot to fill.
Yeah.
And that means we have a coaching search on our hands. We've joked before that like coaching search content is some of the best you can ever ask for.
Head coaching, that's for sure.
Yes. I'm glad we don't have a head coaching search situation.
Oh man.
But we can have a little bit of fun with a defensive coordinator coaching search.
Yeah, I mean that's still a big deal. We want to know what the future of the defense is going to look like, and typically a coordinator is in a program for at least a few seasons, 2 or 3 at the minimum usually.
So the way I see it, there's 3 ways Missouri can go. They can hire a former head coach that probably got fired and is looking to, restart things, a la Barry Odom at Arkansas. An up-and-coming coordinator, poach somebody from a lower level of college football, or hire from within. Without naming names, rank those 3 as far as likelihood. What do you think is the most likely, second, and least likely of those 3 scenarios?
The most likely.
Mm-hmm.
Can you say 2 and 3 again?
Yeah. An up and coming coordinator that you poach from a lower level school.
Okay.
And then the third one is hiring from within, promoting from within.
Okay. I would say the most likely is an up and comer from a smaller school, and then I don't know. I would probably say in this specific situation, I would say a hiring from within is second most likely, and the third would be a head coach that got fired or whatever.
It seems like the up-and-coming coordinator spot blows the other 2 away.
It just seems the most. Not only does it seem likely, it just seems like it would be the best choice in this scenario. I think. Probably a lot of head coaches are this way, but I definitely feel like Coach Drinkwitz is do it my way kind of guy, which is totally fine. And he's got a little bit of an attitude again, which is totally fine. But
Especially when you're winning.
I don't think he would want like a Derek Mason necessarily, or a guy that's used to being in charge to come in.
Yeah.
I think he would rather somebody who's more willing to just kind of go with what the head coach is doing.
Counterpoint, Nick Saban, I don't think many people would say that I would say people think that he is very, I'm going to do things my way and you're going to fall in line, or I don't want you here.
Yeah.
And he's had quite a bit of success of turning former head coaches into his coordinators, and then they bounce to another head coaching position. Steve Sarkisian just got the Texas head coaching spot after being offensive coordinator at Alabama, and previously being a head coach at Washington and USC.
That is true. I do believe Nick Saban is the most CEO-like coach you could probably find out there. I think Coach Drinkwitz is a little bit more in the weeds probably than Nick Saban is as far as the day-to-day stuff goes in their organization, if you want to call it that, because, I mean, Coach is literally calling the offensive plays. Right. So I think that Coach has a desire to be in control, probably even more so than most coaches. But, I mean, you're exactly right. I mean, it's not head coaches want to be in control.
Yeah.
So
Nick Saban's a bit of an outlier in any kind of comparison, but
probably.
Well, you mentioned Derek Mason, and he's the first guy that popped into my mind as just like a hot name.
Oh yeah.
That obviously
a great coordinator.
Yes. Another guy that jumped immediately into my mind was Will Muschamp.
And he's the guy that really made me have that thought where I'm like, I don't know that Will Muschamp would be a fit here. Like, I think he's kind of the guy where I don't know that he would mesh, like, knowing that he kind of has to be under someone else.
Yeah, he was successful previously as a defensive coordinator at Auburn, and
that was before he was a head coach.
Right. And was he DC at Texas as well?
Florida, I believe. Or was he
He was the head coach at Florida for a little bit.
Yeah, I
think maybe he was at Texas before.
You might be right.
The SEC.
I can't remember off the top of my head.
Speaking of Texas, they supposedly reached out to Muschamp, and he said no thanks.
I believe they may have been flirting with Barry Odom a little bit too, and he apparently has made an announcement that he's staying in Arkansas.
Yeah, it's kind of surprising.
Yeah.
So Muschamp not on the table for Missouri. And I agree that would be a weird fit. Just another. I feel like. I know nothing about him personally, but it just seems like from an outsider's perspective, looking at the trajectory of his career, Will Muschamp needs to try to be head coach at I don't know.
He needs to do the Hugh Freeze thing, go.
I don't think he even has to go that low.
Okay.
Because I don't think he's so disgraced as a coach that he has to go to Liberty. What? But I'm thinking he could get a different Power 5 level job. I'm thinking of something I don't know, who's a bad team in the Pac-12,
Oregon State.
Yeah, I feel like if anybody knows anything about Oregon State, they're gonna be like, oh, we're actually good. Obviously,
they're probably in the playoff, and I didn't even know.
Name a school that Mizzou fans know the least about, and then we'll be in the clear.
Exactly. That was just a random Pac-12.
I was thinking Oregon State too, though.
That's terrible.
We're getting really in the weeds on Will Muschamp here.
Yeah.
Talk to me about Derek Mason. I actually like it. I think. Do you think do they kick the tires there at all? Do you think they try to interview him or anything, or do you think he's just got his sights set on something bigger?
No, I absolutely think if you can try and get something going with Derek Mason, you definitely want that action for sure. He's a great coordinator. He doesn't seem to be as much of a crazy personality where he's got a control freak kind of personality that I think would clash. But I think that he's going to most likely end up at Auburn. So
yeah.
But would I take Derek Mason? Of course, absolutely.
Yeah. Speaking of Auburn, you were mentioning before we started recording that Missouri actually has quite a bit of competition here as far as defensive coordinators go.
Yeah, I wrote down every single Power 5 school that has a defensive coordinator position open right now, because I was kind of thinking, well, Derek Mason's probably off the board to Auburn, but Missouri's got to be up there with the next couple of schools as far as program prestige or whatever. But I started looking around, and I'm like, well, there's actually more competition than I realized. These are the other programs that are currently looking for defensive coordinators: LSU, Texas, Michigan, Boise State, Indiana, Notre Dame, South Carolina, Purdue, and Vanderbilt. So a little more competition than I was thinking off the top of my head. Oh, by the way, speaking of South Carolina and our boy, Mike Bobo.
He's staying in the SEC.
He's headed to Auburn to be their new offensive coordinator. And
do we play them next year?
No, I don't think so. I hope not. And South Carolina's offensive line coach, his name is Will Friend. He's not much of a friend to South Carolina. He's been on the job for a month, and he's headed to Auburn as well to be their offensive line coach. So, and he came from Tennessee, so it's just that Knoxville behavior.
Easy come, easy go.
Yeah.
I just tallied 4 programs that you just listed that are a better spot than Missouri.
Yeah.
And then 3 more that are kind of right in the same level.
Yeah.
So
much for 2020 season being like a year where there wouldn't be much coaching turnover.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was very naive of us to think that was a possibility.
These ADs don't care about
They
COVID.
do not care.
They want wins.
Exactly.
All right. So let's look at some more realistic candidates maybe. And hopefully leave like a random name that like we have to look up real quick for last, because that's how we nailed the Eli Drinkwitz hire in our coaching search.
That is exactly
episode.
Right. Yeah, we listed off like 10 names, and I was like, how about that how about that Appalachian State coach? And you're like, you looked it up, Eli Drinkwitz.
Yeah.
So we like never heard of him. You're like, probably not. And then the next episode we were announcing him as the they announced him
we
as the
announced
coach.
it to the world.
We broke the news.
All right, so I've got a name here. David Reeves, UAB defensive coordinator. Let me just run down a list here, and then you pick anybody that you want to talk about. So in that group of like up-and-coming coordinators from a group of 5 schools, we've got David Reeves, UAB defensive coordinator, Scott Simons, Liberty defensive coordinator, Chad Staggs, Coastal Carolina defensive coordinator, and that's it. I will mention Kevin Steele was the Auburn defensive coordinator that was let go, and then
and was potentially rumored that he might be promoted to their head coach, and that caused a massive debacle.
Oh yeah, we talked about that, and I was like, that's never gonna happen.
Massive Auburn debacle.
And then you had me add to the list Clayton White, Western Kentucky defensive coordinator.
Yeah, I feel like all these guys, I think I would probably be satisfied with any of these names, but obviously I think David Reeves from UAB really stands out. They basically had to build that program from the ground up. I mean, I think they literally had to get rid of the program for a couple of years or something. Well, they're back, and like the last 3 years, they've had like a top 10 defense, and considering where they've come from in the last 5-ish years, it's insane how good UAB's been, especially on defense. So he's somebody who he's not very young, but he is still kind of like an up-and-comer, I guess, and it has shown that he can do it. He's shown that he can do it at an improbable place, and they've done it for several years now, so he has the longevity to go along with it. But so he would probably be a lot of fans' first choice, and that's completely reasonable. And then another guy that I think would probably be at the top of the list is Chad Staggs, and he's currently at Coastal Carolina. And he coached in the Sun Belt, obviously last year when Drink was there. So they obviously know each other. They're aware of one another. Could be kind of a connection there.
Clayton White was the Broyles Award nominee for 2020.
Yeah, actually 3 of his last 4 seasons at Western Kentucky. He has been a Broyles Award nominee, which is the best assistant coach in the country. Mm-hmm. So that's a pretty big deal.
Then let's talk about David Gibbs, because he would be the guy if Missouri was to turn inward and promote from within. It would be David Gibbs currently coaching the cornerbacks.
Yeah, David Gibbs definitely is somebody who's very experienced. He's done everything everywhere. I'm not sure that's the flash hire that a lot of fans would be super happy about, but I don't think he would be a bad hire. Let me list off a couple of the things he's done.
I've got you. He was defensive coordinator at Houston in 2013 and 14, and at Texas Tech from 2015 to 2018. Is that where you were going with that?
Yeah, and then even earlier in his career, he was the defensive coordinator at Minnesota and Auburn pretty earlier on, and then he spent a few years with my Kansas City Chiefs as their DB coach, but I'm not sure our DBs were that great during 2006, 2008. I can't remember.
Well, Texas Tech's not usually known for their daunting defenses.
It's true. What he did bring to the table, which I remember there was kind of a big deal at the time when he joined Mizzou, he had a massive emphasis on turnovers. Apparently at Texas Tech, they were not a good defense, but they were consistently great at causing turnovers, and that was something that Barry Odom was so focused on, was how do we create opportunities through turnovers? And so he hired David Gibbs.
Yeah.
And
Missouri was one of the worst teams in the country.
Awful. Yeah. And they did improve, but I'm not sure to the extent that they were going at Texas Tech. But
and not really quite what the hype would have had you believe.
Right. And I mean, that's kind of a intangible kind of thing. I'm not really sure you can.
There's a lot of luck involved.
Yeah, I agree. So you can probably improve your chances at turnovers, but that's. Anyway, so David Gibbs would not be my first choice, but I wouldn't be like super mad about it.
You know who I want him to hire?
Who do you want to hire?
Whoever is the best recruiter, honestly. Whoever's just going to bring in dudes. If you just bring them in, make sure you know what position they play, line them up, and see what they can do.
I almost want...
Is that crazy?
I almost want the opposite. Just like, I don't even care how good at recruiting you are, because Coach Drinkwitz has shown he's a good recruiter. And if you
want all the recruits.
If you can take these recruits and then make them good on game day, I think I'd be more concerned with that, because I want
them to start out good.
I see so many programs like, I don't know, Tennessee's a great example, where they get all the talent in the world and still like are middle of the road. Like how do you take this talent and produce this result on the field? And I just don't ever want Missouri to turn into that. But
that's a good point. That's
quite hyperbolic.
Yeah. I don't know. I just like this recruiting momentum that we have. I don't want it to ever stop.
It is exciting.
And it seems like some of these programs that are, I don't know. Maybe it's foolish of me to want Missouri to compete for some of these top guys, perhaps. But
lock down the borders. That's what you can. That's really what we can try to. That's what we can aspire to do.
If Drinkwitz really wants that to be the goal, I don't think he can put that entire recruiting burden on himself only.
Yeah.
And I don't know. Maybe you can get the best of both worlds and get a solid X's and O's coach who can coach them up, no matter their ranking, but also can contribute to bring in a few top guys.
Mm-hmm. Also, one connection that I failed to mention about Clayton White, who's currently at Western Kentucky. He and Coach Drinkwitz coached together at NC State in 2016, so they probably know each other pretty well. So that might be something to keep an eye on as well.
Who do you want them to hire?
Probably David Reeves or Chad Staggs. Those are probably my I would probably take those two guys over everybody else on most of the hot lists.
You think there's anything there with Kevin Steele?
I don't know. I'm not sure there's as much of a connection there. But certainly, again, kind of, I'm not sure it would be like a super flashy hire, but
there is kind of the Gus Malzahn connection.
That is true.
Coached under him.
That's true.
Yeah.
There's something appealing to me about a guy that hasn't made it yet, and hasn't been super successful at a big time program yet, and wants to, and I think that's why I'm so attracted to. And I was this way with head coaching searches too. I'm just always attracted to the young up and comer with a lot of energy, like Coach Drinkwitz, who wants to prove himself at the next level. I think there's just a lot of appeal to that, at least for me personally.
Makes sense. You ready to talk about basketball?
I'm ready.
Okay. We'll start off with a win. Missouri went to Bud Walton Arena in Arkansas and beat the Razorbacks 81-68. Feels like a lifetime ago.
Just as we predicted.
Yeah, that was kind of wild. I mean, Arkansas couldn't make a single shot. Jeremiah Tillman had the career day, and what's his name? Vanover. Is that his name?
Yes.
Just went over.
If you had no idea, if you'd never watched Arkansas before, you'd be like, who is this guy?
Yeah.
Like,
I thought it was Chet Holmgren for a second. But
who is this 7'3" kind of goofy looking dude just he was like 0 for 9 or something. I mean, you probably
like
got
0 for 5 from 3, I think.
Yeah, like he was just bricking everything, and I actually think he's a pretty decent 3-point shooter normally.
Well, yeah, there's a reason he's taken 5.
Exactly. So
he can usually make a couple of them.
Who was blocking his shot?
Yeah, nobody. Right. Yeah, he could just shoot it over everybody. But yeah, nobody on Arkansas could get anything going on offensively.
That was really bizarre.
They were just getting shut out at the rim. Couldn't make layups.
Yeah.
And they didn't really try to shoot from deep that much, except for Mr. Vanover. Is that his name?
I'm pretty sure, yeah.
Okay.
Desi Sills was completely a non-factor in this game, which was kind of shocking.
Yeah, 0 for 4 from 3. Moses Moody was the only player that really could do much on offense. He's really good. But even him, he was 0 for 7 on 2-pointers. All of his scoring came from threes or the free throw line.
I saw a post-game interview with, what's his face? Their coach, what's his name?
Arkansas's coach, Musselman?
Musselman, and he was just...
He got ejected.
He was freaking out.
Yeah.
And honestly, justifiably so, probably, because, first of all, you know who your players are, and they probably don't normally play this bad.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's normally their strength is offensively. They're normally a kind of a juggernaut. And they come out shooting like 20-something% and missing like what seemed like 500 layups.
Yeah.
That was probably a really aggravating experience for him.
Yeah. The 2-point shooting for Arkansas, 28%.
It's abysmal.
And Missouri was at 59.4.
That's different.
That'll win you a game. And Missouri shot 39 free throws.
And didn't even shoot very well, at least not at the first half.
Yeah. 72% rounding up. Arkansas got to the line plenty, though. 34 attempts for them. Missouri dominated the boards. Still turned the ball over 21 times. Not ideal. But one thing that I liked out of Missouri in this one was they were really pushing the pace. There ended up being 80 possessions in this game, which is 4 more than the previous high against Illinois on the season. And Missouri was pushing it after misses, mostly because Arkansas missed a lot of shots. But they were pushing it after makes and really just getting down the floor. And I think, your average Eric Musselman team, they don't have any problem, running and having a lot of possessions.
That's what they want to do, yeah.
So it was interesting to see Missouri kind of beat Arkansas at their own game. But honestly, Missouri caught Arkansas just on a terrible day.
Yeah.
They just couldn't make anything.
Yeah, I think we were very fortunate that Arkansas shot so poorly, and I do think that Jeremiah Tillman may have, kind of turned a corner a little bit. I think he's been playing pretty well this year, and he's really not dealing with the foul issues that he used to deal with. But, I mean, this was some kind of career game for him, though.
He did whatever he wanted all game.
He really did. And they were missing a player that normally may have challenged Tillman a little bit more. But as Konzo Martin put in his post-game interview, he's not feeling sorry for anybody with injuries.
Right, yeah. He's dealt with a little bit of that. So that was a good game.
That was fun.
And that's
had me thinking we're gonna challenge for the #1 seed in the SEC again. Before you drop the bad news, I did look up one stat about Bud Walton Arena because I was like, well, we never win here,
right.
Like literally never.
Yeah.
And so I looked up in the last 10 years how well they have been playing at Bud Walton Arena. If I can find it, I tweet too much.
Justin Smith was the player for Arkansas that was out. It's one of their front court guys that probably would have made some difference, but
yeah. In the last 10 seasons, including this year's, Arkansas is 142-29 at Bud Walton Arena. I should have looked up what that winning percentage is. I don't know off the top of my head, but it's very good. Mizzou has only won one other game there since 1993, and that was the 2014 season, which was vacated later. But That's just something you don't see very often as winning on the road at Arkansas.
And just convincingly.
Yeah.
I mean, just kind of stomped them.
I would be interested to see some kind of data on, and we've probably talked about this a little bit, but just how much the home court advantage is a non-factor this year with no fans or very few fans. It's got to be less of a deal this season than it normally is.
Anecdotally, I mean, we've seen in the SEC so far a bunch of home teams going down.
Yeah, in fact, right after Missouri won this game, at that point in the very young SEC season, home teams were 0-5.
Yeah. Tennessee, after destroying Missouri, dropped a home game to Alabama, which Alabama has really been rising up the rankings lately.
Yeah.
They're going to look like a tough team to beat in the SEC.
Yeah, that was still a pretty surprising outcome, though. And
yeah, Tennessee looked unbeatable.
Yeah, they really did. And probably that was just because Missouri matches up terribly with them. If Missouri shot the 3-ball better, then maybe we're looking at a different kind of game. But the fact that Missouri couldn't shoot and they couldn't score inside, obviously, because Tennessee just packed the paint, basically. We already talked about that game.
Yeah.
I think we're beating around the bush on talking about this Mississippi State game.
Well, let me. I got a list here for you.
Okay, let's hear it.
West Virginia, Florida, Arkansas, Ole Miss, LSU, Xavier, Charleston Southern, and now Mississippi State. These opponents for Missouri all have something in common, and it's basically a gut-wrenching loss when Missouri absolutely 100% should have won the game, and it's inexplicable how it ended in a loss. Now, some of these more so than others, and in different ways. So, like against West Virginia, you're looking at like an 18-point lead in the second half that just goes up in flames. Charleston Southern, you got a completely overmatched opponent that you have a second half lead on, and then you just somehow let it slip away. But now we get to add Mississippi State, and that's all since Gonzo Martin has taken over as head coach.
We talked about last week on this podcast, we talked about brutal ways to lose a game, and maybe kind of like ranked in our minds like what's the worst way to lose. And this really, it doesn't get a whole lot worse than this. And this like Jekyll and Hyde style of basketball where it's just like incredible play and then just unexplainable horrible play in the same game, or even in the same week is weird, but in the same game like this was truly like the next level. Like, wow, Mizzou, you found the next weird way to lose. You really did it. Congratulations. Okay, this was truly dumbfounding.
And I saw some people after the game saying that they thought, well, you know, we always say we don't like to harp on the announcing too much, yet that always comes before we harp on the announcing and say how terrible it was. Fish, you know, we call him Fish. He said that Mississippi State was a tournament team when they were wrapping up this victory against Missouri. And no, they're not. I don't know what else to say.
I can tell you what they are. They're
tired.
They're
fatigued.
They're very fatigued. And every mistake they ever made in this game was because they went to overtime a few days ago.
Yeah, double overtime against Kentucky 3 days prior.
Yes.
And
like they hadn't slept since or something.
And they came back and won this game despite their fatigue.
It's really incredible.
Dunks were turned into layups for them because of their fatigue.
Yeah, what on earth was that color commentating?
That was awful. And I've noticed that with him before where, like, it honestly, nothing is happening in this game because Missouri's doing a good job.
Yeah.
In previous games with him.
Yeah. Yeah, he's not real he's not a fan of Missouri, I don't think. And like, of course, Tom Hart and John Sundvold were calling the game like on TV right before Missouri, and it's like, please, why?
And I actually,
they can't call all Missouri games, though.
Yeah, I try to when they're on the call from Missouri, I try to notice if they're doing that for Missouri, and maybe
Maybe a little bit.
it's hard not. I feel like it's probably hard for Sundvold to not just know more about the Tigers than other teams.
Sure.
But he consistently throws in bits of information, and maybe this is just flying under the radar for me because I don't know. Maybe he's off on some of these little stats he throws out, but he's sprinkling in these nuggets of information that just show that he's watched this team play before this season. He knows the backstories of the players and stuff like that.
Yeah. Do you think he knows? Do you think he knows Connor Bazelak ran the wishbone in high school?
he probably does. Oh my gosh!
Sorry, I just got.
Do you think he knows how to say Torrance Watson?
Probably
instead of Terrence. All right.
Yeah, I bet he does.
Let's talk about what happened on the floor.
I do think the other announcer described it quite well, that Mississippi State, whatever their arena is called, they might as well just call it
the Cowbell,
the House of Horrors.
Yes.
He literally used that term. I was like, well, that's pretty much spot on. Like, Missouri cannot win in that building.
Yeah. Last year they got trounced.
They scored 45 points.
Yeah.
Last year at Mississippi State,
and they almost had 45 at halftime of this game.
Yeah.
Missouri in this first half was amazing. Just making plays, one turnover in the first half.
That's unbelievable.
50% shooting, 3 for 9 from 3. Tillman, it was spread out. Tillman had 8 points. Mark Smith was getting involved with 7. Drew Smith had 5. Pinson had 6.
Pinson had that awesome play where he was like a little bit too much under the basket, like on a kind of an outlet pass or something. So he just kind of behind the back passed it to Tillman for the dunk. I mean, they looked so confident. They're playing so freely.
Yeah, the defense was incredible. They turned over Mississippi State 8 times. Mississippi State was shooting 34% from the field. They were just shutting them down. Pinson had an incredible first half. 6 points and 5 assists, 1 turnover, 2 rebounds.
Well, the key was Mississippi State was fatigued in the first half.
Yeah.
And they
got to rest up at halftime.
They drank the juice.
Yeah, they got some Pedialyte in them. Get those electrolytes going.
This is not a sponsor.
No. Oh man. I just want to pretend like it didn't happen.
What did happen? Like what's going on? Like what was said in the locker room at halftime? Was Conzo Martin like, "Hey, good job, boys. We won't need to score again.
Pack it in. Nobody get hurt.
What on earth was the message at halftime of this game?
You couldn't. There's not a message physically possible to have been said that would cause this second half to happen. If he said, "You know what, guys, you got it in the bag," that wouldn't be enough in my mind to play so poorly in the second half. Because you could at least just like go through the motions and not just completely squander everything. I don't know.
I keep thinking of something that would be worse than that, but I really shouldn't.
Let me tell you what happened in the second half. Mississippi State shot 68% from the field while only attempting 2 3-pointers. They also shot 13 free throws. And Missouri, conversely, shot 40%. They decided to shoot another 9 3-pointers in the second half, but only made 2 of them. And do you know how many free throws Missouri shot in the second half?
Probably like less than 5.
They shot 0.
Mississippi State was only called for 3 fouls.
Yeah.
They're a man-to-man defense. How do they?
No shooting fouls. 0 free throw attempts for Missouri in the second half. 6 free throw attempts on the game. 6 for 6. They were perfect.
That's how Missouri is going to win. First of all, is how they have to get fouled and get to the line. That's what they do well.
Yeah.
And oh man,
Missouri got out rebounded in the second half, 18-8.
And instead of getting to the line, they just had Mitchell Smith shoot 15 3-pointers, which I don't think he made a single one.
He only shot 1 3 in the second half.
How many did he actually shoot for the game? Like 5?
For the game, he shot 4.
I would love for Mitchell Smith to knock down some threes, stretch the floor, and he's done it in the past. But
I would take 1 out of 4 in that game.
Yeah. How many 3 attempts is too many?
For him?
Yeah.
4.
4 is too many.
Yeah.
I agree.
If you take 3 and haven't made one yet, no more.
I'm fine with that.
Unless it's like into the shot clock.
Just enough to make him guard you. Like
Yes.
prove you're going to shoot it when you get the ball there.
Yep.
And that's really all you need to do. Just a couple times at most, please. You can almost say that about any Missouri player, really.
Really, at this point. I think Drew Smith should shoot. If he makes one, then he should keep shooting until he figures out if he's on or off that night.
I agree. I do wonder what's going on with Drew. I feel like he's really struggled recently, and he's really struggled with fouls.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like he's been almost too active and has been kind of getting called for some ticky-tack, kind of reaching
doing
fouls.
a little bit too much sometimes.
I feel like he fouled, he was called for a foul in a pretty important play in this game that kind of just felt like it sucked the life out of Missouri, and the game was almost over at this point when he fouled the guy on the 3-point shot.
Mm-hmm.
And did he make the shot too?
No, he got 3 free throws.
But yeah, still, I mean, that was suffocating.
Yeah, that was right in the section of the game where it was really back and forth. Mississippi State had come all the way back, taken the lead. Missouri had regained the lead, and it was like right in this crucial moment.
Yeah.
And I don't think that was a good call. I think
the
Mississippi State player sold it a little bit. And I think the Mississippi State player was blocking the ref from actually seeing where this contact would have happened.
Right.
Kind of like on the shooter's right side. So, and maybe there was. We never actually saw a great replay of it because it cut away before the potential contact. But
and you can like also tell when Tillman wants to slip back into his old self where he gets frustrated and wants to like set a pick too like hard or too prominently. I think he got called for 2 different offensive fouls in this game where you set a pick too hard.
Yeah, one
and
of
it
those
was really obvious.
One of them was obvious. One of them was pretty questionable.
Yeah.
But I don't know what you do about DJ Stewart and Iverson Molinar doing what they did in the second half.
Well, I mean, when's the last time you saw that many mid-range shots attempted, much less made?
Yeah, and contested.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm during the play, I'm watching it and I'm saying to myself, "Good defense," and then he just drains it.
Yeah, these fadeaway
like
jumpers
over the top of outstretched, 7-foot Mitchell Smith.
That was really bizarre, and that almost had to have been how like Arkansas felt against us, where it was just like, I don't know what else to do here. We're just missing bunnies. It was the opposite, where I don't know how you stop this. I don't know. They're just gonna make these shots, I guess. We just gotta hope they cool off. That was pretty much where Missouri was, and the fact that they just never did, I don't know, just kind of took the air out of us, I think.
Yeah, Molinar was 6 for 10 in the second half, and DJ Stewart was 8 for 10 in the second half.
Yeah, Molinar was very quiet in the first half. I don't know that he scored more than a few points, but just that was really bizarre to watch.
Missouri turned the ball over 7 times after only turning it over once in the first half.
Yeah, you really do almost kind of see Missouri whenever they get, at least in this game, when they got tested a little bit and started getting frustrated, kind of like slipping back into maybe the way they played a year or two ago, where they just weren't really running good offense, making poor decisions, throwing up bad shots.
It is so bizarre to see that when we saw the best offense we'd seen all season in the first half. The ball movement on some of these plays that ended with dunks or, like a Pickett layup, a Mitchell Smith layup at the end of a play where the ball just rotates around, and it was perfection. It was why I love to watch basketball. Is what was happening in the first half.
Yeah.
And then literally none of it in the second half.
Completely different team. They were just fatigued.
Missouri was fatigued, I guess. They just exerted so much, quality energy in the first half that
Yeah.
they just didn't have any left.
This was one of the weirder games I think I've watched in a while, and it's frustrating. These are the games that you have to win if you want to compete at the top of the league. You have to win games on the road against teams that aren't very good, and for whatever reason, Missouri cannot beat Mississippi State on the road. They really struggle with Mississippi State no matter where they're playing. They just have not played well against them since they've joined the SEC, and I don't know. I guess I'm just happy to get that game out of the way, but it's really frustrating considering how close the standings are going to be at the end of the year. That's just a game you got to have.
Mm-hmm. Is there anything else worth talking about with this one?
I don't know. I'm tired of the roller coaster, man. I'm tired of kind of giving this team my trust and then them betraying me. It just feels like it happens over and over and over.
So, the roller coaster is very plainly spelled out when you look at their KenPom rating the last 3 weeks. They were at 34 before the Bradley game. Didn't perform well, dropped to 40 before Tennessee. Then didn't perform well, dropped to 50 after Tennessee. Then beat Arkansas, jumped back up to 40, and now heading the other direction back to 49 after losing to Mississippi State. When you break it down a little bit further, they're 65th in the country on offensive efficiency, 29th on defense. And I should have said this last week before every SEC team had played multiple games. That 65th in the country on offense, Missouri's been in that position before, kind of early in the conference season. But then there's a telling stat. If you just click a button on KenPom, you see that they are 13th in offensive efficiency in the SEC, second from last, and only 7th on defense. And this we've seen this multiple times now under Conzo Martin, where these metrics look really good when you're looking at the scale of all the teams in the nation, and then SEC play comes and it's like, is a top 70 team on offense in the country really 13th in the conference in offense? It just doesn't seem to add up, but that's where we are. Thank goodness Missouri got those quality wins in non-conference. Their resume is incredible still.
It's literally top 3 in the country. They're 4-1 in quadrant 1 games.
I think we are in for a roller coaster of an SEC season, and luckily for Missouri, they notched those huge wins in the non-conference, because I think they'll have to lose a lot of games to not make an NCAA tournament at this point.
I agree. They would have to have a negative record in the conference, I think.
Even then, I think 8-10 maybe gets you in as a real bubble team,
depending on how the rest of the SEC is perceived.
Well, and depending on who you lose
and
to.
That.
If you drop, what the worst game left on Missouri's schedule is at home against Vanderbilt in less than a week.
Yeah.
So
I just think that this team is just so inconsistent, and so that's going to create these weird wins where how did we win that, and those weird losses where we're wondering how we lost, and the lack of 3-point shooting. Anything can happen in any game, and we're still shooting under 30% on the season from 3-point shooting. We have to be
27.3%.
That's awful.
311th.
I was gonna say that has to be over 300 in KenPom
out of 340.
I just don't know what else you do at this point. Put Torrance Watson out there and hope he makes a few. I really don't know. And then he's a liability on defense.
Yeah, and I don't see how you can expect him to just get into a rhythm when he's playing, 6 minutes a game.
Yeah.
Just giving guys a rest here and there.
Yeah.
You can't really expect to throw him out there and just let him shoot a bunch of shots.
Yeah, I think I'm just going to have to, at this point, be satisfied with just understanding it's going to be roller coaster. There's no way to predict what's going to happen in almost any game we play.
Well, and it seems like the team, when you're looking at the whole season, you're looking at the season as a whole, this team has such a clear ceiling.
Yeah. Because
of the shooting woes. You just can't expect them to have an immaculate record at the end of the season. when you have such a glaring weakness. Even though they'll look good in a game, and they can play with just about anybody because their defense is solid. And I think their ranking in conference defense will end up better than 7th because they have played Tennessee and Arkansas already. But let's talk about their upcoming games. So they play at home against LSU and then at home against Vanderbilt. So LSU is 33rd in KenPom, the number 5 offense in the country, number 123 on defense, first obviously in the SEC in offense, 8th in defense. They're 7-2. They have losses to St. Louis and Florida, and top 100 wins in conference now over Texas A&M and Georgia. That Georgia game was in overtime. And they've got Cam Thomas.
Yeah.
We're familiar with him, former Bass Pro Tournament of Champions MVP. He is one of the best players in the country. He's going to be a lottery pick. He is incredible. He's one of the top guys in the SEC as far as possessions used. He gets to the free throw line. He doesn't turn the ball over. He plays great defense. He's one of the top steal guys in the conference. He converts at the rim. He's a capable three-point shooter, though that's not his strong suit, although he can just go off. He was like 5 for 10 shooting the 3 in a game earlier this season. I don't think it's a stretch to say he's the best player, the best individual player Missouri will play this season.
Yeah, I mean, again, this is a game where it's going to be really difficult to predict what's going to happen, and because I think a lot of it falls on what Cam Thomas does in the game. And I think that Drew, if they just put Drew on him and see what happens, I think that might be the best thing they can do.
Although you may end up with a bunch of fouls.
That is true. So I don't know. It's going to be really important for to be careful with the reach-ins. Hopefully, I don't know. I was going to say hopefully the game is not officiated tightly, but that's typically a good thing for Missouri.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Usually Missouri can outshoot teams at the free throw line.
If they're able to contain Cam Thomas, I think this is a 15-point win, and I think they're absolutely capable of doing that, but they cannot relax like they did in this Mississippi State game because this LSU team will blow up.
Yeah.
In offensive production if you let them slip.
Yeah, and they've got guys we've seen before in Trendon Watford, Darius Days, Javonte Smart. So they've got guys that have been around the block and know what it's like to play in the SEC. And then you just bring in a freshman like Thomas who could be amazing for any team. He could probably fairly easily be playing in the NBA this year and contributing to a professional team.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. This is
they have to win this game at home. They have to beat LSU.
You think so?
Yes, they do. If they want to, if they're, I'm going to sound like a broken record saying this, but
let's hear it.
I mean, if they want to finish top 4, this is the game, non-negotiable. They have to win this game, and I think LSU is super talented, but I really see them as kind of a middle of the road SEC team this year, and I know home court advantage maybe isn't what it is in a normal year, but you still got to figure out a way to pull this out.
You think Missouri does it?
I think they win 80-76. And hopefully Konza teaches them a lesson about
letting up,
about giving up mid-range fadeaway jumpers.
I don't know if there's a lesson to be learned there. I mean, usually if a team decides they're going to do that, it's like,
go right ahead.
Yeah,
we'll take
be our
it.
guest. I think Missouri loses this game, and I think it's another heartbreaker, and they lose it 79-76.
Hope you're wrong.
Oh, almost like reverse of your score, basically.
Wow.
But then Missouri gets to host Vanderbilt.
Speaking of games they should win.
Yeah. So Vanderbilt, they're ranked 136th in KenPom, 126 on offense, 153 on defense, 8 in the SEC in offense, 14th on defense.
They almost beat Kentucky.
Well, yeah. They did.
The power that be.
Yeah.
BBN.
Very close loss to Kentucky at Rupp Arena. I think they should have won that game. They had it. They were right there. I mean, just a few mistakes late. Yeah. Their best win of the season came against number 170 Valparaiso. Looking at their metrics and stuff and their stats, they're not really terrible at anything. They're not really great at anything either, though. They're pretty solid in rebounding. And they've got Scottie Pippen Jr., who is one of the best players in the SEC.
Didn't he, want to be called Scott Pippen? Or he was extremely opposed to it?
Take it away.
Well, if I remember correctly, and I don't know that I do, but I think his name is spelled differently.
Yeah.
And his name is actually Scotty, and not the real, they're both the real, but father Scottie Pippen, I think, didn't want to be called Scott, so people just called him Scotty, but spelled differently.
Yeah, so Scottie Pippen Jr., his name is spelled Scotty. Scottie Pippen Sr., his name is actually spelled Scotty, but he changed it. He always spelled it IE because he didn't want people to call him Scott.
Oh, that's what it was. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So,
well, do you think we'll get a Scottie Pippen Senior cam on this game? On this game, remember last year, or they had a camera just permanently on his face.
You think he comes to Mizzou Arena? They don't really show the crowd that much.
That's true. He looked like he was asleep the whole game last year.
Yeah. This kid's good.
Yeah, he's extremely good.
He kind of was the only reason they were in the game against Kentucky at some points, but then also had a couple plays late where he just kind of threw it away.
Yeah.
But obviously you're having to, every single possession is crucial in a game like that.
Right. And
he's kind of under a microscope in that situation.
Yeah, he's basketball royalty. He better be good.
Yeah. I don't think many people thought he would be as good as he is in college. But they kind of have. I was watching the Kentucky game, and this trio of sophomores stood out to me. Obviously, Scottie Pippen and Dylan Dessou and Jordan Wright. Dessou is 6'9" and very mobile and can step out to a mid-range shot. So I think he might give Tillman some trouble. But I also think Tillman should have a pretty clear advantage when Missouri's on offense. So if they really want to work the ball through Dessou, don't help off of Scottie Pippen, but maybe help off of a couple of other these guys that don't shoot it quite as well from three, and maybe you've got something going. And I think I would be surprised if Vanderbilt tries to play Tillman straight up. I think they'll send a double team pretty much constantly. But I really think this could be another game where Tillman can kind of have his way inside, because they do have a more traditional big that maybe will come in from time to time. But depending on the matchups, I could see Tillman, being successful on offense.
I don't know why you wouldn't double Tillman, because that forces him to pass out of the double to a wide open three, which is probably exactly what you want if you're playing against Missouri.
Yeah. I also think we'll see some small lineups from Missouri in this game. Maybe, I hope that we'll have an opportunity to maybe experiment with a couple different lineups that can generate some offense, because it definitely seems like Missouri has spells or entire halves where just nothing can go right. I don't know. I think I'm over hoping that anybody on this team will find a consistent outside stroke. So I guess, I don't know, that is what it is for the rest of the season. But
I feel sorry for whoever gets that one game against us this year where we shoot 80% from three, like Florida last year. Or whatever. I feel sorry for whoever that's going to be, because it'll probably happen one time where we just shoot lights out.
Yeah, I mean, it hasn't quite happened yet. I mean, early on, the Oregon game, they shot 62% from two, which is pretty nuts. but still less than 30% from three. So yeah, it'll probably be TCU, because then it won't matter to the SEC standings. That'll be the game that we just go off.
Yeah.
Mark Smith will make 5 threes. Surely they beat Vanderbilt at home. Surely it's by double digits. Surely they get the offense going and take advantage of the worst defense in the SEC. So
nothing is sure with this team.
It's a sure thing. Book it, Missouri by 12. 81 to whatever that is, minus 12.
69.
Thank you.
Nice. And I'm going to predict a little bit closer game. A little bit lower scoring. I'm going to predict 69 to 67 Mizzou.
That's a lot lower scoring. That's 12 points lower by the winning team than I projected.
That's correct.
So pessimistically, Missouri loses to LSU but still beats Vanderbilt. They'd be sitting at 2-3 in conference play, having already played Tennessee and Arkansas and LSU. There's a stretch there with Vanderbilt, Texas A&M on the road, then back home against South Carolina, where I think they can recover from a loss to LSU. If they were to lose to LSU and bounce back with a little 3-game winning streak, then they'd have some momentum heading to Knoxville to play Tennessee. And there's a couple other spots, honestly, where I could see them winning 3 or 4 games in a row later on in the season. But just to expect any kind of consistency from this team at this point seems like a fool's errand.
Yeah. Making a prediction or previewing a game and trying to make sense of what Missouri's going to do, that's impossible at this point.
Unless you just want to predict, if you could go place a bet that Missouri's going to shoot worse than,
there you go.
That's 35% from 3 in a game.
Yeah, poor 3-point shooting.
On every single game the rest of the year, you will make money.
That's the only certainty that Missouri has is poor 3-point shooting.
Could probably bet on turnovers too.
Yeah.
We're about to get abducted
that
by
was
aliens.
Weird.
Something.
The airplane landing outside. Probably nobody heard the noise and they're wondering what we're talking about.
Oh, well. I might have to turn that up for them so they can really hear it.
Turn up strange noises in the background.
Anything else?
Heck
of an episode.
Lots to talk about.
Man, Mizzou sports. That's a fun time.
Mizzou sports. That's what we talk about.
I still like talking about it. That Mississippi State game was one of the most depressing things I've ever experienced in my life, and I couldn't wait to come talk to you.
I know. Well, that's the thing. It's we have more to talk about in losses probably because we're emotional and sad about it. I was bummed.
This team's still going to the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, they are. That's going to happen.
They have to play so bad.
Did you see the Jerry Palm early bracketology where we were a 3 seed playing Norfolk State?
that image cursed the rest of the season. That screenshot.
We're 0-1 since that.
Yeah,
since that
screenshot that was being passed around. The universe said can't let that happen again.
Come on, Jerry.
So now Missouri's.
I think he even acknowledged it. He was like, I should have been more sensitive to that. I shouldn't have done that.
Yeah, right. He literally did that just for the engagement.
Probably. That's a good idea.
Yeah.
Controversy. All right.
Are we done here?
I certainly would think so.
All right.
You can find this podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts. We're on Twitter and Instagram at Mizzou Sports Pod, and you can email us at MissouriSportsPod@gmail.com.
You can find t-shirts and stickers on our website, MissouriSportsPod.BigCartel.com.
Thank you, everyone, for listening. We will see you next week.